Hello and welcome to the recording of the Workplace NL's Health and Safety Learning Symposium session on Prime. My name is Kathy Whiffen. I'm Manager of Prevention Services with Workplace NL. And joining me is Sherry Philpott, who's the Senior Health and Safety Advisor. And Sherry will be conducting a portion of the presentation a little later. So we're going to get started in our session. So we're going to be talking about the new Prime program and the path forward, where we're going. So just a quick reminder for everybody throughout the presentation, even though this is a recording, you are still sitting in front of a computer, likely listening to this. So by all means, at any point during the presentation, if you want to stand up, move around, please feel free to do so. And it's good for your overall health. Our learning objectives today, what we're going to be discussing is Prime, the 2023 Prime program, our transition plan for how we're transitioning from our current program to the new version of the program, as well as we're going to look at the Prime criteria and the validation process. I want to start in first by talking about what is Prime. So just a quick brief overview of that. So Prime is Workplace NL's incentive program, and the program can provide you with rebates for establishing good health and safety and return to work practices, but it can also result in charges if your claims cost exceed the expected amount. Prime currently works as two parts. So part one is the practice incentive, which is a 5% refund based on compliance with specific criteria in the areas of health and safety and early and safe return to work. And the criteria that you have to meet depends on the employer category that you are placed in. Part two is the experience incentive. This is where you can get additional refunds, charges, or neither based on your claims experience, but you must meet part one to get an experience refund under part two. So you have to make sure you have those criteria achieved in the first part in order to access refunds in the second part. In the event there are charges though applied, they will apply whether you've achieved part one or not. So this part of Prime is really not changing. You will still need to achieve part one in order to receive refunds under part two. In 2022, we talked about some amendments to the Prime program that resulted in 3 paths, and that's what we proposed. Path 1 was going to be OSH education, Path 2 was going to be OSH essentials, Path 3 was OSH leadership certification. So this is what I presented on last year if you happen to attend our symposium. But we've had some changes since then. So as a result of that, we reviewed what those paths would look like. So just to touch on the changes to give you some context about what happened. There was an OSH legislative change, and the legislative change involved changing the number of workers required for an OSH committee and an OSH program from 10 workers per worksite to 20 workers per worksite. This triggered us to revisit the Prime program to align it with the legislative changes. So that also provided an opportunity for us to streamline the program. That streamlining resulted in us moving from 3 paths in the program to 2. So this chart, and I'm just going to touch on this briefly, gives an overview of those changes. So path 1 is still going to be an OSH education employer. That group is still going to be focusing on conducting OSH education. They'll have to have a committee, worker rep, or designate, depending on the number of workers at their work site. They'll be doing 5 mandatory courses, 2 per year, including a course focused on return to work. We're going to verify that the information, your courses are completed. And if you have CORE or some other certification, then we will accept that as well, so you won't have to do the courses. In Path 1, is going to be employers that pay less than $10,000 in average base assessments, regardless of the number of workers they have at their work site. But if there are 20 or more workers at any one work site, a committee will still be required at that site, and minutes will still be required to be submitted to Workplace NL. Path 1 is also going to include employers who pay greater than $10,000 in assessments, but have less than 10 workers. Path 2, or the new Path 2, is going to be greater than $10,000 in assessments and greater than or equal to 20 workers at any one work site. This group is going to be considered OSH Leadership Certification, and they're going to have a 15-element OSH program, and Sherry is going to touch on what that program is going to look like shortly. Workplace NL will certify you in advance to ensure that you have the requirements in place and then provide you with your refund. Audits will happen on a 3-year cycle, and there will be an 80% requirement to pass. And again, similar to Path 1, core and other certifications will also be accepted. And again, Sherry's going to get into much more detail on these shortly. So I know that when I talked about Path 1, I gave a grouping of categories that will fall into that for employers. But an easy way to remember whether or not you will be a Path 1 or Path 2 employer is a Path 2 employer will need to meet both the greater than or equal to an average base assessments and greater than or equal to 20 workers. If you meet both of those criteria, you're automatically Path 2. If you don't, then you're going to be considered a Path 1 OSH education employer. From a transition perspective, I'm sure you may be wondering what's happening with that. So in 2023, Path 1 employers already rolled out. So we did this year in 2023, we have a group of employers that have already been classified as a Path 1 employer, and they've already started doing the courses that they need to avail of their prime rebate for 2023. In 2024, we'll be adding some additional groups to that list of employers that fall under Path 1. So if you weren't Path 1 in 2023, you may very well be Path 1 in 2024. But we'll be notifying you in early 2024 to let you know whether or not you're a Path 1 employer. In 2025, Path 1 will roll out, and the first audits that will take place under the new Path 2 for employers will occur in 2026. So that gives you a general idea of what happened with the changes. Sherry's now going to take us through the various paths, the 2 paths, Path 1 and Path 2 in detail, and I'll pass it over to Sherry.
Hello, everybody. So like Kathy just said, the new Prime program is going to be made up of 2 different paths. Path 1, we're calling OHS Education, and Path 2, we're calling OHS Leadership Certification. So I'm going to get into a little more detail of what is involved with both of these paths in terms of what the criteria is that you need to meet and how we're going to verify this criteria. So Path 1 OHS Education will help smaller employees improve their safety performance by providing foundational education on their OHS responsibilities and also on the importance of effective return to work programming. All employers that fall within the Path 1 category will be required to have a trained OHS committee, worker health and safety representative or designate at each applicable worksite in accordance with the OHS legislation. In year 1, participating employers will be required to complete 1 prime education course in addition to the OHS committee, worker health and safety representative or designate training. In years 2 and 3, participating employers will be required to complete 2 required prime courses per year until a total of 5 courses have been completed. So in total, the prime criteria equals 6 courses. So you have to have your trained OHS committee, worker health and safety representative or designate, and depending on the number of workers, that could be either the level 1 training or the level 1 and 2 training. And then there's 5 mandatory courses, which you'll have to complete 2 per year. So the return to work course is already available. We have an MSI and a hazard recognition, evaluation, and control course, which will be available starting January in 2024. And then there will be a final 2 courses, which will be made available in January of 2025. Employers who are currently in Path 1 for 2023, which are the employers that are less than 10,000 in annual average annual assessments and less than 10 workers per work site, are required to do both the return to work course as well as have a trained worker health and safety representative by December 31st, 2023 in order to be eligible for their prime refund. Compliance with these requirements in this category will be determined electronically through Workplace Nell's certification training registry. Employers must claim their network and then link their trained workers to them in the CTR. OHS committee minutes will also be checked as well when applicable. It's important to note that any construction employers are still required to complete core in order to be prime eligible. So that will take place instead of having to complete these courses. As well, there is addition to non-construction employers will be allowed to complete core instead of completing the prime criteria. So for example, if you are a employer who is not considered a construction and they don't fall under the construction NIC code, but already achieve core because of other requirements within their work scope, then they could use that to achieve their prime criteria. So now I'm going to go over how to access these courses. So they're going to be found on the CTR or on the certification training registry. So first you go to workplacenl.ca, and at the very top of the screen, you'll see a link that says My Workplace NL Online Services. So you click on that link and it'll bring you to this next page. So it will show you the online services that we have. Click on training and it'll give you a little drop down to the certification training registry. So when you click on that, it'll bring you directly to the registry. From there, you'll see this page, and under OHS Education, you'll click on the button that says click here to view Prime Path 1 courses, and that'll bring you directly to where those courses are located. Currently, it looks like this. Once the additional courses are added, they will also be on this tab as well. So currently right now there's the return to work course as well as the level 1 OHS Committee Worker Health and Safety Representative and Designate course. Starting in January, you will also see the MSI course here as well as the Hazard Recognition Evaluation and Control course. And then the other 2 will be made available in 2025. So you might be wondering how we're going to verify that you are doing these training, I guess. So after an employer submits their annual employer statements via Connect at the end of February, there will be a system check to validate that the employer is eligible for their prime refund. So to ensure that you get credit for the courses that you have completed, the employer must claim their employer network, as Workplace NL will verify courses through the CTR. At least one person has to complete the mandatory courses, but they may be done by multiple people at the workplace. This provides an opportunity for further health and safety education at the workplace. As well, the same person does not have to complete every course. For example, one person could complete the return to work course and a different person could complete the hazard recognition, evaluation, and control course, as long as those 2 people are currently connected to the employer on the CTR. It's important to note that if you do have someone who's trained in these courses and they leave your employment, you must have someone else complete these courses. There's no expiry date on the training itself, just as long as there's someone who is at your employment, or sorry, at your workplace who has them completed. The only one that does expire is the OHS Committee Worker Health and Safety Representative and Designate training, and that needs to be redone every 3 years. So you heard me talking about claiming your network. So this is terminology that comes from the certification training registry. So essentially what it means is that we want you to go online and say, okay, this is my workplace and these are my workers. So what you would do is you would go to the CTR, and at the bottom under employers, you would click the green button that says Claim Employer Network. You will need to have your employer training ID and invoice number from your most recent assessment invoice issued by Workplace NL. If you need assistance with doing this, you can contact one of our service associates at 709-778-1000. And workers who have completed the courses need to be linked to the employer. So you need to make sure that you have it all set up in place prior to validation in February. If you do need help, please reach out and we can certainly help you with this, as well as on the CTR, there's also a PDF document guide that will show you how to do this as well. Okay, so now we're going to talk about Path 2, OHS Leadership Certification. All employers that fall within Path 2 category will be required to have a 15-element OHS program, which is a change from the current prime requirements. The first 10 elements are very similar to what is currently required, with the exception that training and communication are being blended into one element, and we're adding in an element for personal protective equipment. So just to give you a little rundown on those first 10 elements, it's leadership commitment, hazard recognition, evaluation and control, incident reporting and investigation, personal protective equipment, workplace inspections, safe work practices and procedures, training and communication, emergency preparedness and response, OHS committees, worker health and safety representatives and designates, and return to work. There's also an additional 5 elements that are being added on to those. So we've got fall protection, occupational health, MSI prevention, workplace violence, harassment, and psychological health and safety, and management review, records, and statistics. So this has been updated to better align with OHS legislation and the requirements within that. So we're going to audit these employers, Path 2 employers, to ensure that they are compliant with the program. So employers will be audited prior to receiving the refund on a 3-year cycle. So Workplace NL will audit it once every 3 years, and then the employer will do a self-audit for each year for the other 2 years. So the audit will consist of 3 different verification methods. First, we'll do a document review. So we will look at the OHS program and the records that are associated with that program to verify that the prime criteria has been met. There will be an observational tour or worksite tour where we would observe the worksite and work practices to verify that the OHS program has been implemented. And then there will be an interview process where we will interview workers, supervisors, management, and the OHS committee worker health and safety representative or designate to confirm the effectiveness of the program. It's no longer a all or nothing audit. So currently the criteria is must meet everything 100% to pass. We're going to transition into a different type of scoring where you would have to have 80% of the entire audit in order to pass. In addition to that, you would also need to achieve a 65% on each element. And just to give a little example of what kinds of questions or what this is going to look like, here is an example of element 1, leadership commitment. So as you can see, we've got our question laid out. Does the employer have an occupational health and safety policy? And to verify that, we are going to do document review and worksite observation. So we're going to review the policy to make sure that it meets the criteria. And then we're going to observe to see that the policy is posted in a prominent location at each worksite. To continue on with that example, let's look at question 3. Does the employer communicate the OHS policy and program to workers? So this will be verified through document review, worksite observation, and an interview. So we're going to review records to show that the content of the policy and program have been communicated with the worker. Then we're going to observe to see that the applicable legislation and standards are available for workers at each worksite. And we're going to interview the workers to see if the information has been communicated with them as well. So that is what we have for the new program. If you do have any questions on that, you can certainly reach out to us at Workplace NL. You can get us at safety@workplacenl.ca if you wish to email your question, or you can simply call us at 709-778-1000, and they can redirect your call to get you to the appropriate person.